Get fit with HIIT. That's if you do it properly. My name is Jack from Box Nutrition and Performance, and I help everyday athletes improve their body composition and performance through metabolic testing. Today I'm going to be talking about HIIT training, whether or not it's any good, should you be doing it, how much of it should you be doing it, and how should you fit it into your training plan. So what is it? HIIT, or high intensity interval training, is simply a method of training which splits up bouts of very hard, intense exercise with bouts of recovery. And it's a method used by endurance athletes, by team sport athletes, by functional athletes to increase fitness, performance, as well as body composition. And now we're seeing it a lot more in the general populations too. But what are the benefits? The first thing is it's a potent weapon to increase your VO2 max. And as explained in previous videos, your VO2 max is simply the amount of oxygen you're able to take on and actually use. Now, the more oxygen you can take in and use, the more energy you can produce to give you locomotion, to give you speed, to give you power, to go for longer. So the more oxygen you can take on, the fitter you are. And this is done in two ways. The first way is through cardiac development, or improving your cardiac output and the amount of oxygen that your heart and your lungs can deliver to your working muscle. If you work at 95% of your max heart rate or 90% of your VO2 max, that's a very good way to improve these cardiac benefits. The next way is actually at the working muscle. Now, what HIIT training does is improves the content and the function of mitochondria. Now, what mitochondria do is they take on the oxygen and they help convert carbohydrates and fat to energy. So the more mitochondria you have, the better they operate, the more energy that you can produce. With HIIT training, we can see cardiac benefits as well as these mitochondrial benefits to improve your fitness. We also know that it improves insulin sensitivity, which has benefits both in terms of fitness as well as body composition and health. And lastly, it's very versatile because you can do HIIT anywhere, with any equipment, with no equipment, and wherever you are. We know it's good. However, is there any downsides? Oh, to be honest, yes. Because it's so hard, this comes with a lot of issues. One is that it becomes very stressful on the body, and that takes a lot of time to recover. So you simply can't do that much. One of the problems I see with many people is they say that they do high intensity training every day. However, by nature, because it's so intense, you won't be able to hold that level of intensity on consecutive days. And if you're trying to, both of those sessions aren't going to be effective. The next thing is it does increase the risk of injury, overtraining, and illness. That's not to say you can't do it. However, you've got to be careful how much of it you do in the working week. And the next thing, because it's hard, if you're a beginner, if you're sedentary, if you have any pre-existing heart conditions, then you must chat with your doctor before you do any HIIT training. Okay, so how do you actually do HIIT training? For HIIT to be HIIT, we need to make sure the high intensity portions of the exercise session are performed above your anaerobic threshold. This is a whole topic in itself, but your anaerobic threshold is the point at which you go from a moderate intensity exercise to a hard intensity exercise. At or just below this point, you can sustain this intensity, so the heart rate that pays for the power, for around about 60 minutes. Whereas once you cross this threshold, we say that you enter the red zone. Now, the red zone is something you can't sustain, so you're going to tire very quickly. So we know we need to find this point for you to do HIIT training at the correct intensity in this red zone. So how do you find the anaerobic threshold? Now, there are different ways to do it. One is through a calculation. However, that's not accurate because everybody's heart rate is so different. The second one is perceived exertion, which can be a good method once you're used to training. And the last way is through testing. And there's two different tests which you can use to measure this. First one is the gold standard, which is lactate testing. And the second one is through gas analysis or a VO2 test. Both of these tests measure the same point, however they're called something different. Your lactate test is measuring your lactate threshold 2, and this represents the point where you start exponentially producing lactate. Now, lactate is not the sole reason why you fatigue beyond this point, however, it is associated with this point. So we know once lactate increases rapidly, we also know that you're going to fatigue very soon. So once we know this point, we know that anything above it will be operating in this red zone. Likewise, through gas exchange, we're looking for something called the ventilatory threshold 2, or VT2. And similar to the lactate threshold 2, this is the point when you start blowing off a lot more carbon dioxide, indicating you're starting to go anaerobic, or the demand for oxygen is outweighing the supply. And this is what we do at Box Nutrition and Performance. We do gas analysis or VO2 max testing as well as lactate testing to help establish your anaerobic threshold. What we also do with the testing is that we provide you with an interval builder, which gives you an array of sessions specifically targeted to your data. So how do you actually create these HIIT sessions? The first one is finding your anaerobic threshold using one of the points aforementioned. Once you've done this, you then need to perform an exercise, which can be anything. It can be a bodyweight exercise, running, cycling, rowing, skiing, if that's a word, for a duration of between 30 seconds and 4 minutes. You then need to follow one of these high intensity intervals with a bout of recovery, and the recovery is typically equal in length as the high intensity interval. Then all you need to do is repeat this process so you have a total of between 12 and 20 minutes of time spent in the high intensity portion. So for example, if you did 8 lots of 2 minutes hard with 2 minutes recovery, you would spend 16 minutes in this high intensity zone. As you get fitter, the idea is to increase the amount of time spent in this high intensity zone, which is going to give you the real benefit of improving fitness. Okay, so how often should you be doing HIIT? This really will come down to you as an individual. Fitter individuals can simply tolerate more HIIT training throughout the week. However, we normally recommend between about 1 and 3. Anything more than that will make each of these intervals not as effective as they could be, because you're just simply not recovering well enough. As a good rule of thumb, we're looking for at least 48 hours recovery between HIIT sessions. Now, there are caveats to this where you may choose to do a block of HIIT training where you could do more than 3 sessions in a week. However, this needs to be properly incorporated into a yearly plan. Now, you can't expect to get fit with just HIIT. This is just one small part of the performance puzzle. You also need to incorporate your easy base building zone 2 work to really develop your endurance performance. So if you've got any questions about HIIT training, about testing, then make sure you get in touch or visit boxnutrition.co.uk to see how we can help.